All right, thank you all so much for joining us. Of course, have lots of questions about the lawsuit that was just filed by Prutehi Litekyan Earthjustice, challenging the U.S. Air Force's plans to um, blow up bombs and other munitions at Anderson Air Force Base. I just wanted to start off though with introductions. If we could just go around the squares here with regards to your name and your role and affiliation to the developments this morning. And so, David, maybe we can start with you, go to Manyeka, and then Rachel.
Sure. Good morning. I'm David Hemken. I'm a senior attorney in the Honolulu office of Earthjustice, and we're representing Prutehi Litekyan in this action.
Half a day, I'm Anika Flores, and I'm with Prutehi Litekyan Earthjustice.
Half a day, I'm Rachel Tanya, and I am local counsel associated with Earthjustice for Prutehi Litekyan.
Right, and Manyeka, maybe we'll just start with you because you were just at district court. Can you tell us what exactly was filed today and how we got here and how long it took?
Okay, well, I was actually there with Rachel, and maybe Rachel can answer that question, and then I could get into those other details. Thank you so much.
Sure. This morning, we filed a complaint for declaratory judgment and injunctive relief. I'm going to reserve the actual complaint and discussion of that for David. I am local counsel here on Guam, and so we filed those documents as well as other documents so that David can come in and practice in Guam. We also filed the summons against the defendants, the U.S. Air Force, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was not the Department of Justice. It was the Department of Defense, the U.S. Air Force. And so I'm going to have David take over.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to pick up any details that you want, but really appreciate Rachel's help in getting the documents on file this morning and getting us into court. And so the case is a case against the U.S. Air Force, claiming that they violate a federal law, the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires all federal agencies, including the military, to take a real hard look at the impacts of what they're proposing to do and safer ways that they can accomplish their mission before they make decisions. And here the decision we're particularly concerned about is the Air Force's decision to dispose by literally blowing up on the ground, on the sand, bombs and other munitions right next to the water's edge in northern Guam. And they did this without any consideration of the impacts of that activity on the environment and on the people and on the culture. And most importantly here, there is new science out that there are much safer, better alternatives that would be environmentally safe. And the law required the Air Force to consider using those safer ways before they went ahead with doing things the old-fashioned way by literally blowing things up in the open. And so this lawsuit hopes to force the Air Force to comply with the law and look at those alternatives and those impacts so they can make a wiser decision. And equally importantly, the people of Guam can weigh in on the best decision, the best way forward for this type of activity.
And David, just to follow up on that, what are some of the alternatives to the proposal? Because as we understand, the permit is still under review here on Guam, but also in the press release that that was sent out just this morning, you described these violations as egregious. But what are those? Do you mind spelling those out? What the other alternatives might be, or what exactly is the remedy that this group is seeking?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the remedy. The remedy is to force the Air Force to disclose to the people of Guam and actually consider itself, what are the impacts of blowing up bombs right next to the beach, right next to the jungle, on ancestral lands? What are the effects on the environment and on the people? So they've never really taken a hard look at that. And then there's new science out in 2019, the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the National Academies of Science and Medicine and Engineering, they came out with a study, actually a couple of studies that have identified safer ways of disposing of munitions than blowing them up in the ocean and blowing them up, on the ground. And so the methods, I mean, basically what the Air Force has been doing for many years is blowing things up in the open. these alternate technologies would involve containerizing and making sure that any of the contaminants and the pollutants that come out of blowing up munitions would be contained so they wouldn't get out onto the beach, they wouldn't get out into the ocean or into the air. So it would be a safer way. So there are a lot of different technologies that were examined by the experts, and they determined for a wide range of munitions, including, to the best of our knowledge, everything that the Air Force wants to dispose of at Anderson. They can do it in a safe way. You know, we're not saying that they can't, you know, do this activity and get rid of the munitions. What we're saying is you need to look at these safer ways of doing it to protect the environment, the people, and the culture.
And Monica, you share your personal and family history that is tied to some of the developments. You're right here, my family dreams of return of our ancestral lands, and we want to put our land back to culturally appropriate productive use, but we can't do that if the Air Force is allowed to contaminate the land and water with their toxic waste. Can you talk to the significance of wanting to pursue these alternatives and why it's important to preserve the current space as is?
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's important to mention that it's actually prohibited. Open burn is a practice that is prohibited, and the US EPA has made an exception for particular practices of the military that are permitted. And so this is the way that they're proposing to do it is extremely antiquated and dangerous. And they haven't, as David said, they haven't considered any of the alternatives, including no alternative, which ultimately is what, of course, our group would want. The situation is quite serious and quite urgent. If the military isn't even considering these safer alternatives as well as no alternative, and they're just trying to push along to conduct, this harmful practice without engaging the public in a very meaningful way, without asking us what we would like to happen, they're violating the law. And so my grandfather and my great-grandfather had farmed pigs and copra in Taragi before the war. Our family lost several hundred hectares of land taken by eminent domain by the federal government after the war. And we have a small parcel of land still in an absent. And so we have to drive through the land that was stolen from us. And it's a very, it's a dehumanizing experience. One, to see the land that was taken from our family for reasons of security now being used, for recreational use, but moreover being used for these harmful practices that will forever contaminate our drinking water, that will impact our fishing practices, that will impact the practices of us cultivating traditional medicines. And of course, it's every family's dream. Every family who's lost land after the war, we all want to see the return of land one day to the native people. And so why would it would just not make any sense to have land come back that's totally unusable, totally poisoned, and not to mention all of the important, not to mention that this land is sacred. This land, holds the remains of our ancestors and is being desecrated by these activities as well.
And I did want to ask about the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine report that is cited here. Can you talk about the significance of that and how it relates to, I guess, the stability of the case and it moving forward legally?
David,
Did you want me to touch on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, you kind of asked two questions together, and I want to be real clear in my answer. In terms of the case going forward, in terms of what the law requires, the law doesn't require Prutehi Litekyan or anyone else to come up with the alternatives. The law puts the burden on the Air Force to take a hard look at the impacts of what it's going to do and reasonable alternatives that are out there that could do the job and do it in a more environmentally friendly way. And so in this case, in terms of what the law requires, the Air Force has completely ignored its legal duty to do any of that. There was no effort to do any type of environmental assessment and look at any type of alternatives in this public review. And I have to emphasize, the public review is not only the review of individuals who live in Guam. but also outside experts, so others can weigh in who are knowledgeable. So by keeping it all in-house and keeping it behind closed doors, the Air Force has violated the law. But as far as the national academies go, one of the really significant developments since the last time that the Air Force applied for a permit in 2018 is this couple of studies that came out, one from the national academies and one from US EPA, both of which honed in on how hazardous and dangerous it is to blow up munitions in the open as you do with open burn, open detonation. There's absolutely nothing to contain the contaminants that inevitably are produced in the explosions and in the fires. When you're talking about open burning, you're literally talking about piling munitions into a metal container, pouring diesel fuel on top of them, and then lighting it on fire. I mean, this is real old school, and it's not the kind of thing that we do in the 21st century, as Monica correctly pointed out, for anyone but the military. So both EPA and the national academies said this is a deeply problematic approach to disposing of munitions. It's very harmful to the environment. And so they identified a number of different alternate technologies that could allow them to do the same thing, dispose of munitions, but do it in a safe way. And so the existence of these, national academies and EPA kind of seal of approval alternative technologies just really underscores how egregious the Air Force's violations are in going forward with the permit application they submitted last year, completely ignoring the science, completely ignoring the progress we made in dealing with things in a safer way. So the legal violations would exist whether there was a National Academy study or not. But that study just underscores how just the military just wants to go ahead with whatever it's going to do, doesn't care about what the law is, doesn't care about what the facts are, doesn't care about what the people of Guam want. And this lawsuit is about stopping that.
And I did want to talk about the timeline a little bit. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Rachel. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm going to add on to David's sentiment. The complaint alleges that the last time, these permits have been renewed every 3 years, but at least as to the open burn practices, I believe that according to our complaint, it was inactive since May 2002. And if the Air Force is intending to restart that practice now more than ever, because the technologies and the science has been advanced, we need to start talking about that. And I think that's really the underlying concern here, is that the defendants did not even engage in what the law requires, which is to look at all these alternatives.
And maybe Monica, do you mind speaking to kind of the timeline of how this all, came to be? And I know we're almost reaching a year since the permit was filed,
Sure.
and exactly who Prutehi Litekyan is also filing this on behalf.
Okay, so we were invited to attend an informational briefing with Senator Sabina Flores Perez at the Guam legislature with Guam EPA to try to bring to the public some information about the permit application. And there were some really amazing activists from the ceasefire campaign in the States who also presented on some of the alternative technologies. And so from that conversation, Sabine, there was a lot of interest in approaching and in trying to find a case. And we were very fortunate that Earthjustice actually approached us to take this case. It happened real quick. It happened toward the end of last year. We had our first meeting with Earthjustice in November. And here we are today at the beginning of the year, finally taking it to court. We have looked at the permit, and it's quite scary to think of, or rather, we've looked at the permit application, and it's quite alarming and disturbing, deeply disturbing, really, to think that we are going to be dependent on reports from the military about the types of munitions and hazardous waste that are being disposed, the frequency and the weight. And we're not going to have a real handle. There's not going to be any clear transparency on those activities. And we're talking about really dangerous chemicals like lead, magnesium, strontium, uranium, and PFOS and PFAS. These are forever chemicals that will not break down in our natural environment and will continue to harm generations to come through water contamination, soil contamination, and then the contamination that trickles down from groundwater out toward the ocean. This will be a devastating impact for our community and for our island.
And if I may, just, I'm
yes.
sorry, if I may, just one other thing regarding timing. So, we became aware of the situation and spoke with Prutehi Litekyan in November. We then immediately reached out to the Air Force and wrote to the Air Force in the middle of November and said, we're very concerned about you going ahead with this project and this proposal to continue open detonation and resume open burning after 20 years of not doing it without doing any environmental review. And we're not aware that you've done any environmental review. So if we're mistaken, then please let us know, point us to the documents, because there should have been a public process and we're not aware of anyone happening. We've waited for a response from the Air Force and they've never responded. So finally, we had no choice but to take action if we're going to protect Guam's environment and Guam's people from this very hazardous and reckless endeavor, again, without any prior consideration of impacts or alternatives.
All right. I just wanted to ask my last question. We're seeing things also pop up, David, just there where you are calling us from right now in Hawaii with regards to, the water crisis at Red Hill. We're seeing a lot of these military and environmental impact kind of, events occur. In the larger scheme of things and in the work of Earthjustice, why was it important for Earthjustice to also get involved in this?
Well, I appreciate you raising that. I actually represent the Sierra Club in the proceedings that just completed over Red Hill. And there's a lot of strong parallels here. In both cases, you have branches of the military who were sworn to defend us from threats, posing threats to the quality of life and really the ability to have life on the island. In Red Hill, it was these World War II era fuel storage of 100 million plus gallons of fuel over our sole source aquifer on the island of Oahu, where I live. And here, with the action we filed today, these are open burning of open detonation activities that spread contaminants in the environment, including posing potential threat to the northern aquifer that provides water to 80 to 90% of the people on Guam. And it is simply unacceptable for our military to take these types of reckless actions when there are safer alternatives available to threaten the very people that they're sworn to protect. And so Earthjustice feels very strongly that throughout the Pacific and throughout the rest of the country, we're going to do what's necessary to protect frontline communities from these types of threats.
All right, that's all the questions I had. I did just want to open it up for any comments that I may not have addressed, if anyone has anything else to add.
Okay, I'm not sure. I just joined again. Sorry about that.
Yes, no problem,
When
no
it
problem.
rang.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something, just my 2 cents about it was, Earthjustice and the organization and the lawyers that work within that organization, this is significant in terms of support in Prutehi Litekyan's efforts and mission, really since the group's beginning back in 2017. I'm really grateful that we've got that kind of support on our little island, because they really bring firepower in terms of defending our natural resources and our environment. And I mean, at the end of the day, really, that's what we're doing this for, is for the preservation of our island and for the children. I'm thankful that David is on board. And that's it.
All right, thank you so much, Rachel. It was a bit in and out there, but I think we heard the core of your message. Manieka, did you have anything else to add?
Yes, definitely. We're really grateful to Earthjustice, to David, David Henkin, Tian Chao, and to Rachel, Taiman Azuzu. We couldn't do this work without them. And yeah, Prutehi Litekyan is just really excited to see this case move forward. And thanks so much to Tomas for reaching out and for this interview.
All right, thank you so much.